All right, well, hey, man, that's really loud. Hey, I'll ask y'all's opinion on this because I struggle every time I come up here. So that sticker of Charlie's face, how should I set my cup on top of it? Should I set the Bible on top of it? Should it be upside down? I usually choose just to set my cup on it because it looks like he's watching me, especially if he's not here. Like, man, I feel like, oh man, he's listening in. Hey, I'm Mark, executive pastor here. I'm glad you're here with me and decided to join us this morning, whether you're in the house or online. If you've been keeping up, we're walking through some parables, and we spent quite a lot of time in Luke. We were in Luke chapter 15, Luke chapter 16. Charlie started us out with some Luke chapter 18 last week, and I'm going to take another little section of Luke chapter 18, and this is a parable that is... I loved it last week if you were here. Jesus just said, instead of all the code and all of the confusion and the explanation later on, he just came out in the beginning and said, hey, this is what this is going to be about. And this is kind of the same thing. It's pretty straightforward. And if you just read it, you'd go, okay, I know what he's saying there. And the topic is something that we could easily just say, okay, I got that, and roll on. I don't want us to miss it this morning because I really think that what's at the heart of this parable is really applicable for us. And if we don't stop and think about it a minute, we might just miss it. I think it may be really applicable for us, especially just right now in the state of the world and what our lives are like. And so to kind of set it up, little known fact, some people may know, there's a few things that I really want to do that I've never done, and one of those is surf. I've always wanted to be a surfer. Now, I think I would be a horrible surfer, honestly. Anything that's ever had to do with balance, I did not do well in. But I think it's as much about the act of surfing, maybe it may be even more about the surf culture, just what I perceive the surf culture to be. Like, everybody's pretty laid back and chill. And since I'm not by nature laid back and chill, I just like to listen to some Jack Johnson and pretend like, I'm chilling out by the beach, more than even catching a wave, maybe. So I've always kind of wanted to do that, and the thing that's closest to that, where we live, is whitewater kayaking. It's the boats that you get in and you strap yourself in and have the spray skirt and all of that. And a few years ago, Terry and I got to spend a summer in Colorado, and we saw everybody doing that. And we even saw them out there. If y'all have ever watched it, the way the river will move, there'll even be a wave that they'll surf it, because it's got the same kind of action that you would have in an ocean wave almost. And so I was like, man, this is cool. Well, Colorado, I got to go to California to surf, Colorado to do this. But then I got back, and no joke, just a few Sundays later, a guy was leaving church, and he had one of those boats on top of his car. And so I said, hey, man, do you do that? He said, yeah, I'll teach you. Little did I know, this was one of the kind of the godfathers of the whitewater movement in Arkansas. He was real quick to say, all right. He met me at a pool. We spent about 2 hours, and I finally hit one roll. And then that weekend, he had me on a river that the Native American tribe in that area had named the Skull Crusher. And it was funny, as it wasn't really that far from my home my hometown that I grew up in. But so anyway, there's a lot to this story. But that day, one thing that I learned, I was with all these veteran whitewater kayakers, paddlers, and here I was, this newbie, and those veterans would all go over to him and say, "Why did you bring this guy here on his first time in a boat?" And he said, "Oh, he's a tough guy. He'll be all right. He can swim." So that day, I just got thrashed. The river just thrashed me. I hit my head on the bottom. I came just up, almost close to drowning. In every way that the river could thrash you, it thrashed me. And by the time the day was finished, my knuckles were still white, but I was like, man, I want to do this. Let's do this again. But I realized that what those guys would do and what I was doing in the river were drastically different. I was trying to manhandle the river. I thought that this was something like, I'm going to show up here and I'm going to show this river who's boss. which y'all can imagine, that just doesn't work. I can imagine that's what it would be like if I was surfing and I was trying to like manhandle the surf and then I just get pounded by the waves, you know? Those guys and those surfers, when you'll watch a video of somebody that's really good at it, man, they become a part of the wave. They realize that the wave and the river is big and powerful, so much bigger and so much powerful than they are. And they position themselves in a very humble spot to maneuver with and position themselves with the power of the river or the wave, right? Well, I think there's something really important there. And today, this parable is about humility. And y'all, I can't, and I hope you walk away. My goal today is that all of us walk away remembering that humility is a really huge thing to God. You know, a few weeks ago, we looked at how big repentance is to God, how he throws parties when repentance happens. And here we are, and he talks about humility, and it is this massive theme of the scriptures, that us being humble is a big deal. In fact, Micah 6:8, you know, this is one of my favorite verses that there's this question that's asked, that's a question that we all have, and then there's an answer that follows right behind it. What does the Lord require? Do justice, love mercy, and walk humbly with your God. It's at the core. And I'll be honest, I got humbled a bit this week, just even working through this, but had a really wild Wednesday in our house. I woke up, normal day, had a lot of things on the docket, plans and things that I was going to try to accomplish. And then just before 8 o'clock, I get a call from my eldest that he's been in an accident. And from that moment, even after I realized that he was okay, I was just shooken. And when I showed up at the scene and the car is totaled, and I'm scanning the crowd to make sure that he's standing and okay, and there he is, and he's okay. And at that moment, I realized that all of the things that day had planned, and all of the things that I thought were so important, and if you're a mom or a dad, you get this. Like at that moment, it did not matter. All that mattered is that my son was still breathing, and he just had a few scratches, you know? And the rest of the day, it felt that way. I tried to do something else, but I couldn't, because at the core, that day, it showed what mattered to me in my heart. It wasn't all the things that I thought were so important. That was what mattered. He's still breathing. And it feels like if we're not careful, we'll just pass over something massive like humility and, you know, make it about other things. This happens a lot with religious people. It becomes about the do's and the don'ts. In fact, Jesus goes right at it here. And if you really want to go right at it, go to Matthew chapter 23, where he gives the woes to the Pharisees, where the people, sometimes us, who make a lot about the outside of the cup, but the inside of the cup is dirty. Something massive like humility we miss for the sake of trying to look and be right in all these areas. And God is looking at the heart, and he's concerned with our humility. But I think that's because, like repentance, these big things, repentance and humility, like, do you really want to be humiliated? When I use that word, humiliated, you don't want to be humbled. Who wants to be humbled? Everybody signing up for that? Like, do you really want that to happen? Do you remember a time that you were humiliated, that you were really humbled? I think it's just so core to our human nature that we do not want to be brought low, you know? I think it's the reason why the dreams that a lot of us have had at some point, everybody's kind of like, yeah, you remember that time when you had that nightmare that you woke up and went to school and got to school and realized you didn't put any clothes on that morning? It seems like everybody, like at some point, has had that dream, which if you think about it, is just complete nonsense. I mean, have you ever had a dream in the middle of it, you wake up and you go, or you're thinking, and you're like, man, this can't be real because this isn't true. With this one, like, I mean, you walk outside and you don't even feel the breeze. You sit on the pleather seats on the bus and you don't stick to them. I mean, think about being naked on the school bus, man. You're not going to get up off that seat. I mean, there's all kinds of things that would have kept you from actually getting to school naked. But here we still have this dream and we're afraid because why? Because we would be humiliated, because we would be exposed. We don't want to be exposed. We don't want to be humiliated. We want to protect and show the front that we want everybody to see. So let's look at this, and I'm just challenging you maybe to like really consider what Jesus might be wanting to say to you this morning. So it's Luke chapter 18. We'll begin in verse 9. And like I said, he just comes straight out. He said, he also told this parable to some who trusted in themselves that they were righteous and treated others with contempt. Let me stop right there for a second before I actually read the parable. It says, the people that he's talking to, they trusted in themselves, assuming or presuming that their righteousness was enough. Now, even though all of us would say, nobody's perfect, at the same time, this group that he's speaking to assumes that their righteousness is enough. So they're trusting in themselves. But then what happens when you begin to trust in yourself and you realize that you're really not all that? Well, in order to make somebody who's not all that feel like they're all that, what you have to do is bring others down. I was talking to one of my boys this week about that this happens all the time with friends, especially when you're young, but I think, man, it happens no matter how old you get. To make one person feel better, a lot of times the reason they're mean to others is that they just want to, if they can bring you a step lower, then it makes them feel a step higher. And so Jesus says, this is that group. They're trusting in themselves, and so they're treating others with contempt. I see a lot just watching my 5-year-old twins and how they interact with one another of just what's really true. I've seen what they do and what, a 50-year-old friend does is really the same thing, but they just don't try to cover it as well. They haven't figured out how to do that yet. And so all the time, if I say something good about one, the other will immediately cut me off and say, well, I'm that too. It happened at the pool yesterday. Darcy was there with me, and we were swimming, and this cute little girl, I don't even know, two, maybe 3 years old, her family's walking away, and they're ahead of her, and she's just running past us real quick, and she's got this really cute little run, and I just looked over at it and said, boy, you're quick, you're fast. And before I could even get it out of my mouth, Darcy said, well, I'm faster than that. I'm like, girl, can I not just say something nice about her? No, I'm faster than that. But y'all know we're just like that. So here's what Jesus says. Here's the parable, and it's not that long, but there's just a powerful picture here. He says, 2 men went up to the temple to pray. One a Pharisee, the other a tax collector. The Pharisee, standing by himself, prayed thus: God, I thank you that I'm not like other men, extortioners, unjust, adulterers, or even like this tax collector. I fast twice a week, I give tithes of all that I get. But the tax collector, standing far off, would not even lift his eyes to heaven, but beat his breast, saying, God, be merciful to me, a sinner. I tell you, this man went down to his house justified rather than the other. And then this really critical line that we'll see is repeated earlier in Luke. For everyone who exalts himself will be humbled, but the one who humbles himself will be exalted. So you got 2 men, 2 very different reasons for going to the temple, 2 very different prayers at the temple. I think one interesting thing is just the direction of their prayer. If you look at the Pharisees' prayer, it sounds like one of those prayers like a daddy might pray at dinner when the kid's not willing to eat the veggies. Like, oh, dear God, would you please help Johnny to realize that those green beans will make him strong? Is that prayer really to God, or is that to Johnny, right? You've been in those places where somebody's trying to get a message to you, but they're praying, but actually they're talking to you. I mean, this Pharisee is making sure that everybody knows his righteousness. The direction of his prayer is not heavenward, man. He's got this social thing that he's trying to do, and put it under the guise of something holy and righteous. Then there's also this comparison that's going on. You know, the Pharisee is doing what we were talking about a minute ago, what Jesus said, he treats others with contempt. He is comparing himself with all the people around him. So he's, measuring himself up and putting it on the scales. Well, I got this, and I got this, and I got this, and I'm better than you, and him, and that. I mean, he even calls this guy out. I'm better than this guy. Who is the tax collector comparing himself with? He's comparing himself with the righteousness of God. And he's like, man, I'm a filthy sinner. My only hope is your righteousness, not mine. I think we do this. I remember a time that I was taking a group of college students on this international trip, and it was right after I was like my first job, so I was just right out of college. And playing college football, I had spent a whole lot of time in college, way too much time in the weight room, trying to get the size that the coaches wanted me to be, which was always this massive struggle. So I spent way too much time, and it became way too much of a focal point of my life. But I'd kind of gotten to the point where that's kind of known for that. That's what I did all the time. That was kind of my persona. Well, I'm on this trip, and we're in line to go through immigration. And I'm talking to this guy behind me who is a European professional rugby player. And we're just talking, and I look over, and the group of college students that I was bringing they're just over there dying laughing. They're about to fall on the ground. And they're looking at us, and I'm looking around like, why are they looking at us? And I just keep on talking to the guy, and so then here in a minute, I'm like, y'all, what was so funny? And they're like, man, I mean, this dude was, 6'6", 6'7", 3, whatever, just, dude, you look like a little shrimp, man, standing next to that guy. And that's, isn't that true? Like whatever your area is that you think you're just all that, will put you in a different pond. I love, there's a song by Coldplay. I just love the line where they say, you might be a big fish in a little pond, doesn't mean you've won, because along may come a bigger one. Right? It depends on which pond. Yeah, you're in a little pond, you might think you're all that, but there is a bigger pond, and you're going to meet somebody. You might think you're the smartest in the room, but I guarantee you, there's some rooms you could be in that you wouldn't be the smartest. Well, I'm the best. But you put you in a different room. And then what this tax collector gets is if you put you in the room with Jesus, now you're really in trouble, right? I just thought about this. Jack the other day said, Dad, wouldn't it be cool if we could walk on water? That'd be awesome. And I said, man, did you realize Jesus did that? And he went, no. Yes, he did. So, when you just look at this parable, honest to goodness question, y'all. Which one is you? You got two men. They're at this temple. You're at church this morning. Which one of these looks most like you? And be careful before you just immediately jump to the tax collector in that position of humility, because I think there are a lot of things going on right now that you feel like your opinion on whatever that topic is puts you in a different category, and you can look over at the other group and point a finger and say I'm better than because of this or that or the other. I just think there's a lot of things going on that are spinning that you may not realize your pride and lack of humility. I might not realize it. It may be so thick and hidden from me that I'm not seeing it. And that's the reason I think it's really important. Jesus, man, he loves some humility. And like I said here at the end, he says, for everyone who exalts himself will be humbled, but the one who humbles himself will be exalted. Jesus said that earlier in Luke chapter 14. So there's another parable there that I want to read for us. And in this parable, Jesus is hanging out, he's eating with some Pharisees, and he says, now he told this parable to those who were invited when he noticed how they chose places of honor, saying to them, When you are invited by someone to a wedding, when you're invited by someone to a wedding feast, do not sit down in the place of honor, lest someone more distinguished than you may be invited by him. And he who invited you both will come and say to you, give your place to this person, and then you will begin with shame to take the lowest place. But when you are invited, go and sit in the lowest place, so that when the hostess comes and asks you, a friend, move up higher, then you will be honored in the presence of all who sit at the table with you. For everyone who humbles himself will, whoever exalts himself will be humbled, but whoever humbles himself will be exalted. Y'all have probably, in the days that you've lived, seen this thing that Jesus is saying right here be true in your own life, or you've watched it be true, where somebody tries to promote themselves to a position or talk themselves up, and then it's really, really humiliating when they have to be brought low. And then somebody who's just humble, and like time and it tells, and then all of a sudden you just see that in that humility, it's a beautiful thing when that person gets lifted up. Athletics is an easy place to watch it because you can just see somebody trying to do that and then somebody else not. In fact, when I got to college, there was this tailback who was the best athlete that I had ever seen. The only problem is he thought that he was even better than that. And so he told everybody about it, and he talked it up, and anybody played in front of him for a second, he was mouthing the coach, and he thought that he was really something. There was another guy that came in the same time I did that had transferred from the University of Florida, and he didn't even say it. I didn't find out until I had already played with him a couple years that he had 2 national championship rings, because he didn't talk about it. The first guy, he lasted about a semester. The other guy played till he finished and got all kinds of awards, but you never would have known it. This thing that Jesus is talking about is just true. And he says the one who does this self-promotion, God is about humbling those people. He does that. In fact, I'm fixing to show you some verses where it says over and over and over again that God does that. Self-promoters, people who do, he brings them down. But then he loves to take those people who are humble. And he loves to use those people, because when he uses those people, just like we looked at in those different stories like Gideon, he loves to take the impossible, and then he steps in and it shows off his power in those who are actually humble. Let me just go ahead and give you a few of those. Psalm 18:27 says, you rescue those who are humble, but you humiliate the proud. Watch the theme in each one of these. The Lord lifts up the humble. He casts the wicked to the ground. Psalm 147. Proverbs 3:34. Toward the scorners he is scornful, but to the humble he gives favor. Luke chapter 1, this is Mary talking after she finds out that she's with child. She says, he has brought down rulers from their thrones, but has lifted up the humble. And then James chapter 4 and 1 Peter chapter 5, both of these make the same. There's 2 statements, and they're repeated both in James and in 1 Peter. One is, humble yourselves before the Lord, and he will exalt you. And in 1 Peter, the way it says it is, humble yourselves, therefore, under the mighty hand of God, so at the proper time he may exalt you. That's my favorite, by the way, 1 Peter 5, 6, and 7. Y'all need to check that out. But the other thing that's repeated in both of these, and this may be the best of all, is in James chapter 4 and in 1 Peter chapter 5, God opposes the proud, but he gives grace to the humble. Do you want the divine favor of God upon your life? He gives grace to the humble. He exalts the humble. Again and again and again. He opposes the proud. Do you want his opposition against you? God really likes humility. Thinking about this wreck that we had this week, I thought back about accidents that I've been a part of, and one of my most humiliating days was an accident I had when I was in high school, and I was driving. In our small town, there was one red light at this end of town and one red light at this end of town, and I was about halfway between the two, and I was headed to basketball practice, I think, and I noticed up ahead at the bank on the right that the cheerleading team was doing a fundraiser, car wash. And so, I'm 16-year-old Mark, and I, kind of lean back a little bit more in my seat and get my smile ready, roll down my windows, and I start passing by, and, whatever my slyest, look over, like I'm interested, but I'm not interested. Hey, what's up? I look. And then there's no reason for anybody to stop at that point in this town. There's not a turn, there's nothing. And when I look back up, sure enough, man, this car has slammed on its brakes. And so here I go. This is right in front of the bank. So I slam on my brakes and I slide. I'm just loud. And I stop, 6 inches from that car's bumper. Problem is, and this was just a car, had an 8-inch trailer hitch coming out the back of it. So now I got the ball of that trailer hitch in my bumper, which means now I got to get out of the car. We got to stop. They got to get out and see what damage they've got. Please stop by, everything, this whole thing. And I'm just standing there like this, and all those girls are just up there laughing their heads off. I look back on that, and I'm like, man, that was a humiliating day. But what would have been even worse is if that arrogant Mark had not been humiliated and allowed to just go on through that day thinking that I was something that I wasn't. When God brings humility into our lives, he's doing us this massive favor. Because he needs to put us in our place where we realize who we really are and who he really is. And we begin to cooperate with the ocean of his power. The worst place that we can be in opposition to our God is to think that we're more than we actually are. And that inauthentic, unreal, fake version that we might want to put out on social media, but that's not necessarily true. So, we're going to sing here for a little bit, and man, if you're in the room or if you're at home, this is at least for me, man, this is a big challenge to really look at myself and ask this question. Of those two, which is you? Are you the Pharisee? Or are you the tax collector who sees himself in truth? So let me pray that we would do that. Father, I see from, not just from the study of this parable, but my goodness, over and over and over again,